What if you could shrink down to the size of an ant or a molecule and explore the world from a completely new perspective? Sci-Fi loves this idea, but is it really possible? Spoiler alert, no. Sci-fi often provides inspiration for the ideas that are later born of science. But this is just not possible. And that's the topic of today's video. Shrink rays. A story that has this sort of shrinking phenomenon can still be a good story.
Wow, humans are dumb. I guess we're never gonna get busted on anything.
What does that mean? Busted? Busted on what?
I mean...
Did you guys shrink this girl down and then lobotomize her to cover your tracks? Did you dump Diet Coke in her exposed brain? That's horrible!
The point of this isn't to say that all these stories are bad or whatever. The point is to show why this is a sci-fi idea that will never actually be realized. I've got 4 basic arguments. Number 1, the intangibility of it. What kind of ray shrinks things? What wavelength or frequency of light or whatever substance you're beaming at a target are you using in order to shrink it? Sounds kind of ridiculous when you say it out loud. Using some sort of shrink chamber doesn't get you out of this either. The chamber suffers the same problem as the ray. What kind of ray is bombarding you within the chamber? What other mechanic are you invoking, and through what medium? The whole idea is just scientifically intangible. Argument 2. The mechanics of it. How precisely is this supposed to work? What is happening to your molecules, atoms, and your up and down quarks and electrons? Well, there are 2 different types of explanations. Subtractive shrinking is shrinking by removing or deleting molecules, atoms, etc. from your total count of them to make you a smaller size. This wouldn't solve the problem of placement though, and you would have to somehow sew yourself back together into a commensurate shape. An excruciatingly painful and time-consuming process, if not certain death, I might add. Divisive shrinking, featuring magic. This would be like legitimately shrinking molecules, atoms, and subatomic particles by some known proportion, instead of deleting them. In this case, we are using whatever medium we are beaming at our target to somehow shrink them down by some proportion. In which case, how? Are you altering the fundamental constants of those shrunken particles and their targets somehow? Through what mechanics? This is basically magic. Argument 3. The fatality of it.
Shoot. No reason this shouldn't work now. Huh?
Let's say that you somehow overcome the mechanics of it, and you shrink yourself down to 1/10 of the size, and you somehow don't die in the process of shrinking. Congratulations! Welcome to a world where the underlying patterns of synaptic firing that correspond to your brain states now occur for different lengths on the neuron chain and for different durations of time. Good luck getting used to that. You can imagine, for an analogy, how resizing the memory on a computer chip could impose limitations on its functionality. Furthermore, I hope you hate breathing because oxygen is now 10 times too large to get through your lungs and fit into your cells. Suffocation would happen before you could make sense of what was going on. I could go on about temperature regulation, other biological problems, molecular disruptions, etc., but I think you get the gist, even if you survive the initial blast. You're dead.
Fatality.
Argument 4. The reconstitution of it. The problem of reconstitution is the problem of returning to proper size. There are, you guessed it, two primary types. Additive reconstructing. This would be like recreating the molecules, atoms, subatomic particles of your body in order to reconstruct you after subtractive shrinking. I don't think this would work because if we are losing neuronal components, i.e. neurons in your brain, simply putting new ones back in isn't the same thing. Even if you could somehow reproduce each molecule, atom, subatomic particle, how would you retrain all of that instantaneously? It's not just about putting the pieces back together. It's about recreating a highly complex and dynamic system that has been uniquely tailored by time and experience. Multiplicative reconstructing, featuring magic. This would mean multiplying the size of particles so that they are larger. If additive reconstruction goes with subtractive shrinking, then multiplicative reconstruction pairs with divisive shrinking. This would also mean that we would need an invertible magical process for the divisive shrinking technique. Not just any method of shrinking will do, it has to be invertible for us to use multiplicative reconstructing by altering and then unaltering the fundamental constants of the molecules, atoms, etc. This is the most physically impossible of all four shrinking/reconstitution processes, because it requires all of the second most impossible one, divisive shrinking, to be possible in the first place. Thus, it has to be less possible than divisive shrinking, because of the added constraints of invertibility and feasibility. As such, shrink rays will never happen, but honestly, they're better off in fiction.